Good morning. I'm Dr. Hajra C. Medica, the Cultural Advisor in the Ministry of Education, Sports and the Creative Industries. Today I'm here with renowned Dr. Reginald Murphy, and we're going to be talking about the recently passed heritage legislation, its significance, how it came to be, what it means for us, and the overall objective of this legislation. Welcome, Dr. Murphy. If you could just take us back to how the bill came into being.
Thank you. Okay. We started with the Underwater Cultural Heritage Convention. It's a UNESCO convention that we were required to sign as part of UNESCO's team. Which is a team, but part of the signatory to the UNESCO convention. So we are looking, how can we protect our underwater cultural assets? And then we realized halfway through this bill, we said, well, wait, why are we protecting things we don't know about underwater when we have nothing on land is protected except in the English Harbor? So the bill sort of was expanded and morphed. I don't know, 2 or 3 years later, legal drafting and planning. And then the bill was suddenly starting to take shape. And we started to compare it with other countries within the region and elsewhere to see what can we learn, what's from other experiences. Where are the real weak spots here? We don't want to miss too much. And so slowly over time, we had all sorts of people work on this bill. We had different committees, we had volunteers. At least 20 or 30 people had their input into it, including legal draftsmen, lawyers from overseas, the UNESCO experts. And we had a couple of workshops to discuss it. And we ratified the UNESCO Convention to protect the underwater cultural assets first, the 2001 convention to protect underwater cultural heritage. And so the next phase was to work on the legislation. And so it's been a long time coming. We've been working this thing for close to 20 years. And it's now gone before the House. It's went through 3 different governments who sat on it. It didn't go anywhere. But we kept tweaking it, updating it. And I think with World Heritage, that gave people the realization that, hey, there is some value to protecting our cultural heritage. And so everyone started to get interested and ask for questions. And so we had a select committee meeting of both the Houses of Parliament, and they all made valid contributions, and then people realized this is a safe bill. This is for the benefit of all Antiguans. One, it improves our SDGs, to protect our education and culture and archaeological sites. And then we looked at the tourism values. Shipwrecks are time capsules of history, and people tend to go and pick up stuff and bring them home, and they fall apart for lack of conservation. So we're saying leave them alone till we get a conservation lab. We'll tell the stories in a protected environment. And so the benefit is to create dive opportunities for people to go dive, locate wrecks, and map them. It's as an activity. And there are divers out there who go around the world doing this sort of thing, and they would be interested to come to Antigua, dive tourism, to help us locate and find our more than 250 shipwrecks. So, and that's another spin-off. So another benefit of it is we have lost close to about, let me see here now. We had over 250 pre-Columbian sites that date back long before the arrival of the Europeans, going back 3,000-4,000 BC, like 5,000-6,000 years. We have lost more than 3/4 of them because they're mostly coastal. And the development rate in Antigua and Barbuda is tremendous, it's unbelievable. And I can't think of more than maybe about 20 pristine sites, of which we don't do the last 2 Arawak or ceramic age sites, as we call them. All the rest have been destroyed. And but thankfully, over the years, the members of the Historical and Archaeological Society who run the museum, and I've been running field schools, and we've been going out into the field and locating and mapping these sites. So we have an idea of what's there. So it provides us the opportunity now to go back and revisit these sites, rank them for their levels of importance, and make recommendations for potential development. So you can leave some aspects of it for the future, or study them if it's too important and they have to be developed. Then we can say, okay, look, let's go and study it, excavate it, bring it, and tell the story will be told in the museum and in our history books. So part of this is to have an education package as well. So education has an opportunity now to develop beyond the normal textbook, the tale told by overseas people, as I said, the tale told by the winner. So we can write our own history for the first time. And also we have close to 100 windmills left. And each windmill is a sugar estate, and each sugar estate had at least 2 cemeteries, and then the works, the sugar works, and they all evolved over time from the mid-1600s to the 20th century. So you have the whole evolution of the sugar industry right here in this country, and how it shaped our society. And before that, there was an early period where we had indentured workers doing all the work before the introduction of the enslaved Africans to a large extent. And they grew indigo and cotton and tobacco. And we have never found any of those estates, but we know the ruins are there. So we needed to get an opportunity to protect some of these things so we can get in there, do the research while we still can. Again, my motto is you can't live in the past, but you can't ignore it. And you can't look at the tangible without the intangible. So you look at the old ruin, but what does it really mean? You have to look at how this built, who are the people, who are they? And it's us. These things are built by us for us. And yes, they made a lot of money for overseas people in different time periods, but there's a whole social program that has to go along with it. So this bill is far more than just protecting an old windmill or protecting an old site. It's protecting our culture and enriching it and developing it and getting opportunities out of it. And it's like the national parks. Imagine if we had 2 or 3 sites just like this. You know, it can be done, but we have to put culture first. We put environment into every environmental impact assessment is done, but they never do a cultural impact assessment. And yet, in some cases, the cultural aspects that are being destroyed are richer than what was left in nature. So we have to, we've readdressed that balance. We have balanced the books now, so let's move forward and get a whole new program and train a lot of young people in archaeology, conservation, mapping, historical buildings in St. John's. We have beautiful buildings that are unique to St. John's. St. John's was designed after major fires. The lessons learned was to have these broad avenues like High Street and Long Street and St. Mary Street, and then smaller, narrower connecting alleys like Corn Alley and Temple Street. And so it's after the fire, so they learned the lessons, and the unique styles of architecture came out of all of that enterprise, and including our tripartite roofs that you don't see anywhere else. And you can see some remnants of the Georgian buildings. Out of the 34 buildings that we mapped as a historical society of historical importance in St. John's, there are only about 10 or 12 left. So we have to protect some of those as examples of Antiguan architecture, or origins of our culture from the Victorian and Georgian and before. So, I mean, so much opportunities for young people to get involved in this thing. Our challenge is going to be getting it funded, getting it up and running, to all the training in place. I don't expect I'll be alive when it's finally up and running, but we got to start now, because every day we lose something. Right now, there's a backhoe there digging up something somewhere. Look at all the graves that they keep digging up, and now they're expanding into new projects elsewhere. These are historical persons. People travel to come and see, here's my relative from many, many years ago. And this person is historically important. And yet we treat them as nothing. We just sort of walk past the tombstones being turned over by backhoes in the churchyards and not wondering, whose grave was that? Was that person, did he contribute to the building of this country? So these are the sort of things we like to look at. It may not be relevant to every single one of us, but collectively it's important. It's like a puzzle. Every piece of it fits, and every piece of it adds to who we are as Antiguans.
Okay. You mentioned that this has been a long time coming, almost 20 years, almost older than you.
Oh yeah,
almost
definitely. Older than me.
So in terms of moving forward, what are some of the initial or first programs or activities that will jumpstart the enforcement of this legislation?
Okay, first I have to look at the regulations and see, are there regulations to work with this? And if so, because it's a fairly comprehensive bill, I have to reread that section of it. Then we have to look at the permit system and get control of who's coming to Antigua and Barbuda and doing what kind of research. Every year I travel, I always target a place that came here, and I go and collect artifacts and bring them back to Antigua. And so it's, we want to see, if you want to come here to work, no problem, but you're going to work on our rules and on our supervision. And we have so many artifacts unprocessed sitting in the museum collections that will provide research material for generations of Antiguans. So we try to salvage what we can now before it's lost. And we don't allow anything overseas unless under a permit. We're not coming to your house to ask you, hey, that old copper in front there, the government wants to take it. We say, okay, no, we get it registered. I just want to know what's happening to it. We want to be able to come and say, hey, this is a fine example of this type of material culture, but it belongs to you. And we're not going to take it. But if you're going to sell it to another Antiguan or somebody who's going to be living here, and don't ship them overseas like we've lost. I've seen at least 60 of them packed in a container. And that's the kind of thing we want to stop, the commercialization of our culture, our cultural heritage materials. And so we need to have permits, a permit system. We need to have an advisory committee. The management of this thing is going to be the National Park, which is the legally entitled heritage entity that manages heritage so far. They're going to become what's called the competent national authority. but the park is going to now sub the work out to the National Advisory Committee. That committee will be groups of experts from different departments of government. We will take them on board as and when needed. But we just need to have 5 to have a quorum. For that, we have to have an architect, somebody from the survey department, somebody from DCA, with development, so they need to know what. And the idea is to create a national database, a digital database. So when the plans go in, just like you have all the plans and plots on our GIS systems for the country, it's a plot on a layer of the heritage sites. So when you go to do a project, somebody at DCA can check and say, hey, look, this has a big Amerindian site. This is the site, this is where it is. Call in somebody, let's go investigate it first before we just give permission. And again, we're going to rank all the sites, like say, like the English do and the Americans do, like say, a 1, 2, 3. A 1 is too important, don't touch it. Right. 2, it's important enough, but you must leave some elements of it, and you have to negotiate what you're going to do with it. You can't just destroy it. That's being done now. And 3 is too far gone. There's nothing but a couple of things in the ground. So what we do, we'll do the archival research. We have to do archival research on every single project, and create a dossier. And then we just add to that dossier, do an archaeological dig. Dig could be take a day or 2 or 3, but you provide employees with newly trained archaeologists, Antiguans, and then you can decide on the development, how are you going to go with it. And if you want to leave a part of it with, let's say, a sign, tourism, or you just want, if it's 3, it's too far eroded, you can build over it. But if it's a 2, you have to leave some aspects of it, or you have to negotiate and document it totally before you destroy it. But 1, you don't destroy it. It stays.
So from what I'm hearing, the register of places and objects will become particularly important.
The registry is key to the whole thing. And luckily we have a massive inventory, but that hasn't been upgraded since the 1970s. I remember I used to go to this as a schoolboy, following the archaeologists around, and they're going from site to site to site looking for Amerindian sites. They're mapping windmills, they're mapping all sorts of things. And that's where my interest started. But I, luckily enough, because I was the only person interested, I inherited all of their notes. So I have an inventory where all these sites are, and it's registered at the museum in our database. So we can take that as a start. So in a sense, we have a big push to start. We're a long way away in the process already, but it's a matter of confirmation and confirming what sites are there, and then going out to see what new, because lots of new ones have been found since. And some of them are really massive. We found a site in Barbuda that it's like, I say it's about 10 kilometers long. And we also have just a little patch across the road. But now the professionals went in and they surveyed it systematically. It keeps going and going and going. And we have no idea how old the site is, how intensive it is, when it's established. We have to go and date it. There's a whole lot of work to be done there. So whenever I hear a backhoe going over to Barbuda, I panic. And we've already lost the Strombus line, which was a unique site in our Caribbean history. Stands from Spanish Point almost to the beyond, almost to Codrington. But it followed what was the old paleo coastline of Barbuda before Palmetto Point, and all that sand was deposited there. So as you excavate there in this site, you go through all the sand and suddenly into archaeological site. So it shows how the coastline is developing over the past 10,000 years or whatever it is. But what was there? Indians were going there, pre-Columbian Indians were going there, people long before the Arawak, and using it, the resources of Barbuda, the seafood resources. Right nearby is a salt flat, and right there is tons of conch. They harvest the conch, they process them, they could salt them and preserve them, and they threw all the conch shells in a pile. That pile was over 25 miles long and about historical records, about 10 feet high, and what's left of it now is about 30 or 40 feet wide. And only tiny sections are left intact between all the developers. And it's heartbreaking when you read the old historians who went there like in the 50s and describing it. And that's a unique asset. And we're finding Antigua, we all now learn about the trade networks and what Antigua played in that, the porters Antigua played. They'll come to Long Island and get flint. The only place to get high quality flint. And Antigua you get really high quality clay for making pottery. Or you can move on to Barbuda, get the shellfish, the conchs, which they made tools with and ornaments. Also, then they go on to St. Martin and other islands where they lived. And we find Antiguan raw materials taken as far as Puerto Rico and as far as Grenada and Trinidad and places like that. So Antiguan materials being transported elsewhere and in exchange networks that these people had. And other things are being imported. So we're finding exotic stones and like turquoise and amethyst and jadeite. They don't come from here. So they're importing exotics with people that meet in their passages. Because these were seafaring cultures. But we tend to think of them as little simple, foolish people living in the bush along the roadside, as described by the Europeans.
Right.
You know, they're simple Arawak people. But they had trade networks all the way along the entire coastline of the Circum-Caribbean. Turquoise comes probably from Arizona or Mexico. Who knows? There's no sources found south of it or in these islands, yet we find it here. And so, and same thing with the jadeite. Comes from Guatemala. And the other sources in Cuba, but it hasn't really been confirmed. But there's no contact with Cuba at the time period that matches what we're finding here. So it shows we have so much more to learn about this history of these islands. And so these laws are to protect these sites and to give the archaeologists, it puts a brake on a little bit on some of them, till we can get in and really study them properly, recover as much as we can, and to make decisions. Because, you know, it's like they're like living, they're storehouses, they're time capsules. And gives us a good opportunity to really study our history from a different perspective. Look at the evidence and not from what somebody writing a book. My father's history book, Caribbean Reader, from 1930-something, I was reading it. The Arawaks are tall, fair-skinned, and handsome, with aquiline noses. The Caribs are short, dark, broad noses, and big heads. You know, those stereotypes are long gone. And so we have moved way beyond that now. We're doing DNA work, and we're studying where the relationships work between the islands. And what we've recently found out, Antigua was on the fringe of two developing early big chiefdom societies. Not state level yet, but big chiefdoms. The Tainos import going north into the Greater Antilles, and what we call the Suezoid, Trumasoid people going south to South America. And we have only the Trumasoid. We don't have the Suezoid, and we don't have the Taino. So we're right on the frontier, and they came here to get all the resources. So they were controlling Antigua, and the resources are being dealt out. So we're different, and we need to know more about that difference between our neighboring islands.
You mentioned something very important earlier, that this is not just about the past, or it's not about safeguarding the past. What does this bill mean for a piece of tangible culture now that will be perhaps viewed the same as we now view the colonial ruins, that sort of thing? What does this bill mean?
It's kind of awkward to answer that. This bill is, first of all, this bill is a record. As the minister said in Parliament, it's the first time. Right. And it's long overdue. And they're actually saying, why didn't we have this long ago? And that's the question I'm getting. But I thought it was protected. I thought the windmills were protected. So what this bill means is we now have something tangible we can show, say, look, we can control things now, come up with all of the policies in place and the regulations. And it stimulates, I think, new jobs and new professions. We don't have a conservationist on the island. We don't have a proper archivist who does work into specific cultures over time. Archives in Antigua, they tend to treat people and treat them as, okay, I want a passport. I need to find my grandmother. Or I need to find so-and-so. I need a birth certificate. I need this, but we need to move beyond that. The archives are a trove of information that we can develop and publish on. Like, for example, I want to find out about what's happening at Bubi Ali when I was doing the forensics down there. Only to find out it was a big, massive burial ground for the entire city of St. John's, and all the military people, all the people came in and died on ships. There are thousands and thousands of people buried there. And when you come across the records, like, what happened to the people who were executed in the Prince Class revolt, or if you want to call it that? What happened to those people? They normally hang them up and leave them there until they decay. You have about 80 people hanging there. It smells so bad that the city complained, St. John's people complained. And the colonial records say they hired someone to remove them and bury them at Bubi Ali, the Negro burial ground. So that, to me, if Prince Class and all these others are down there, or we have thrown out our national heroes, they're residing our cooks. So this is the kind of thing we want to stop. That sort of and that can only be done by looking at the archives. So we need to have a joint report and all-encompassing study. And again, this is, to me, it's again bewildering. I've opened the door to a tent, and it's filled. It's like another dimension. There's so much in there. It's overwhelming with the first steps. As my wife said, "What are your job? What are you going to be? What's your title?" I said, "Murphy." So what's going to happen, we don't know. But the opportunities are there now, and it's going to develop. I think it's going to develop a life of its own and move forward.
If you had to leave a final message to the general public, what would it be in terms of the role they can play in supporting the enforcement of this legislation?
Okay, again, we're not coming to get your old toaster and your old fridge and your old iron. They belong to you. But we don't want you to sell them overseas. Keep them in Antigua for our culture to enjoy. That's the first message. The second message is, if you know of anything in your neighborhood or in your community that you think is historically important, an old well, old, I don't know, some feature, something there, because it includes movable objects as well as houses, as well as graveyards, as well as anything, as long as it's historical. And we use 50 years because we're a new country and we want to be able to include a few things. But generally, in archaeology, you don't dig a site unless it's more than 50 years old. But so it's the best we want to get out is if you have something and you know something, we need that information. It's the oral history, the written history, the photographs, anything that could build, and you can build a dossier and submit it. Say, look, this is what information we have about what happened at this house or this around this area here. We just want to have documented as much as possible so we can pass on that information.
And we have mentioned intangible cultural heritage, tangible cultural heritage. If we were to give a simple definition of either, how would you describe them to the people of Antigua and Barbuda, some of whom might be hearing these words or terms for the very first time?
Okay, well that's a intangible and tangible is a UNESCO way. They use it extensively, but it's a really nice term to use for better than tariffs. A really nice term to use for defining. You can't have a physical object man-made unless somebody had the ideas and the design and the reason and the rationale. So you have the tangible object and it's supported by the intangible, how it was made. For example, the water tank up here in English Harbour was built in the early 1700s by the planters, the enslaved people built it. They designed and built it. They literally paved the hillside, put a big cistern, and it provided water for the British Navy. The sailors would come in, they bring their barrels, and while they're filling it, it gives them social time. So the tangible now and the intangible, the water. And so as they're using that water, they have the time now to socialize, and they carve their names into the walls of this thing, into the stone. And so you have a tangible record of who, where, and when. And for that, we take that now, we go to the archives in England, and we look for the muster records, and we find that person's name, find out where he lived and when he died, where he came from. And we can also look for the ship. And while searching the ship's records, it tells you what they happened here, what they did in Antigua, and you search the English records, and where did they go. So you learn, one little lead. So the intangible is connected to the tangible. You can't have one without the other. And it's a way of, it's like playing a guitar. The guitar is intangible, and the songs and the playing and the methods and all that is intangible. And the art that comes out of it. It's the same thing whether you cut a stone or lay a brick. Everything is connected. You can't have one without the other. So we look at both. That's why it's important to document it.
Thank you so much. And as we round up, this is probably unconventional. So we started with the import of the bill, the background behind the legislation that has been passed. I just want to end now with a snapshot of Dr. Murphy. Who is Dr. Murphy? In maybe 100 words. I can sense the passion as you talk about, tangible cultural heritage and the long 20 years that you've been involved with getting this legislation to the place that it now is, where we're considered a model for the rest of the region.
Yes,
so
very much so.
For the one person in Antigua who might not know who Dr. Reginald Murphy is, could you just sum that up for them?
Okay, I'm an archaeologist. I spent about 14 years in universities. I specialized in everything, a little bit of forensics, a little bit of geology, a little bit of material sciences, like West African material culture and pre-Columbian material culture. I also, I'm an affiliated professor at the City University of New York, the Graduate Center, and at the University of Nebraska. But I'm reevaluating them right now, the American. So I'm also, I was in construction business, I did construction management, and I studied construction, building construction, and architectural design for the first 4 years of my post-secondary education. I did it in Canada. Came back, practiced for a couple of years. I realized every time I dig a hole, I'm finding some cool stuff. Started working with different professors and visiting field schools. And I'm a founder of the museum at Antigua. Just me and Nicholson decided one Saturday afternoon we have too much junk in our house. Let's go and build a museum. So we started that. And I got bored with that after a while and said, let's go to restore a windmill. So me and a bunch of volunteers went and did Betty soap. So that's what we do. It becomes a passion. It's more than just, it's curiosity. And it's a matter of saving. The more you dig into it, the more you realize how much we have here in Antigua as Antiguans in our culture. And how it's intertwined with other countries and other people who are no longer here. I excavate anywhere here, you're digging in England. Except with the African flavor, because you're going to find African artifacts. And you're going to find English China, the same thing. And as you go back in time, you find people who are here from South America, people here from Central America, and they all pass through and call Antigua home at some point in time. And once you realize that, and you realize that you're the only person who knows all this, you get a sense of responsibility that you have to sort of, it overtakes you, it consumes you, because you go to my house now, it's just artifacts strewn everywhere because I'm trying to classify them, to package them, to send to the museum. So it takes over your life, and even your friends around you get involved in it, and that's how it keeps going. It's like and we attract a lot of researchers, and I love working with the researchers because they come in with new ideas and new techniques, and this industry has changed. I mean, I started with a trowel, a map, and a compass. Now they have GPS, they have GIS systems, they have scanning electron microscopes, handheld. Is like Star Trek, when they come into the field. And I learned so much more from these younger people, so that's why I keep teaching and keep getting involved. It forces me to keep up with them and to learn more, and everything they do, I say, how can I apply it here for the benefit of here? One guy brought an underwater drone just to test it. I said, good, let's go to the dockyard and check out the seawall. So that's the kind of things you do, and you learn more, and you pass on that knowledge to other people as well. And so it's so who I am, it's kind of hard to say, because I do different jobs. I'm the Secretary General for UNESCO, because something I have to pay the bills. So that's my paid job. All the rest of it is volunteering, from forensics to archaeology to museums to Betty soap. So I've done more volunteering throughout my life than actual work. My wife said, if you got paid for all the jobs you did, I wouldn't be here now digging the garden myself. But it's a matter of, but she's just as bad as me, because she caught the bug too. So it's good. And passing on the knowledge, it's when you go to take kids to the field and you're working with them and you're showing them and they're making discoveries. It's fantastic. Like right outside this window here, I had a team from school arrive with me, volunteering to dig for a week. I said, oh Lord, what can I do with these kids? So my window was right there. So I said, let them dig a hole here and keep an eye on them. I said, dig here, lined it out for them, it's a meter square, scrape it off 1 inch at a time. Time I get upstairs and look out the window, they already dug down about 2 feet in one big hole. And I come running back down and I realized, wait a minute, those are prehistoric artifacts. They dug right through the layers of the historical period very quickly. Everything was just thrown out into a big heap. All of the broken china and the broken glasses and nails. And they hit a plastered floor level. And they dug through that and started pulling out big long blades and knives and scrapers made of flint and Amerindian pottery. So we now know there's two cultural periods of Arawak, the Arawaks and the archaic people, both in this area here, and on top of that we find the European period, English period. So we have 4 different cultures represented right outside this window within 2 feet. Thanks to these kids digging, it'll take me a month of scraping, counting everything, but they just dug right through it. So anyway, it shows the benefit of getting volunteers out there, getting work done, being all-inclusive in your research, so you pass on information. All of them want to go off and study archaeology. Unfortunately, none of them did, but when they get to, it's fine when they're 6, but when they get to be about 18, 19, and the parents are finding that $100,000 to send them off, they go, liar. Archaeology don't pay you. Lawyer or medicine. And don't come back till they have those. So, it is what it is.
Well, Dr. Murphy, I just want to thank you for sitting down with us today and giving us a comprehensive breakdown of this very important piece of legislation. I also wanted to thank our cameraman, the man behind the camera, Mr. Jeremiah James, from the archives. So you can see we're already starting that collaboration.
There you go.
The archives, creative industries, and we have UNESCO section, and we'll soon be involved with working along with the National Parks Authority.
Oh yeah, we already started. I've moved back into an office over here, and I'm interviewing people and talking to people about it, trying to organize how it's going to go, talking to people at different government agencies, from St. John's development people right down to DCA even talk to the tax man because he's a keen volunteer. So, you know, you have to get everybody on board and get those key people because I can't cope with everything and I can't do everything, otherwise it won't go anywhere. So it's a matter of getting the resources in place. And next thing is to go, next week, my job next week is to talk to the people in the financing so we can talk to start raising money to kickstart this project. Because national parks, I don't want to be a burden on the dockyard. This has to run independently. So even though they'll be involved, deeply involved, you don't want to interfere with their progress. So let's start a whole new different ball game.
Okay. Thank you again, Dr. Murphy.
Anytime.